The bag my husband stole was filled with worthless paper, but the look on his face was worth more than gold. He thought he had taken everything from me. My life savings, my future, my hope. He stood there, under the flashing red and blue lights of the police cars, pretending to be a heartbroken victim. He cried fake tears for the officers, telling them how a masked man had broken in, held us at gunpoint, and snatched the duffel bag containing every penny I had ever saved. He didn't know that I was the one who held all the power now. He thought he was the director of this sad movie, but he was just an actor, and I had already rewritten the ending. My name is Glenna Stone. I am 58 years old, and for 35 of those years, I worked as a nurse at St. Jude's Hospital in Cleveland, Ohio. I worked double shifts, holidays, and weekends. I missed birthdays and anniversaries, all to build a small mountain of money. It wasn't for a fancy car or a big house. It was for my mother, who now lives in a nursing home that costs more per month than most people make in a year. That money was her lifeline, her dignity. It was the promise I made to her that she would always be safe. My husband, Mark, knew that. He knew, and he tried to take it anyway. Mark was a man who could charm a snake out of its own skin. When we met, he had a smile that made the world feel warm and a voice that promised forever. But over the years, the warmth faded, replaced by the cold shadow of bad investments and lazy dreams. He lost his job 2 years ago and never really tried to find another. Instead, he complained. He blamed the world, the economy, and sometimes he blamed me. He said my money was our money, but he never contributed a dime. As he described the robber to the police, his voice cracked with false emotion. It was a perfect performance. I had kept the money, $250,000 in cash, in an old brown leather duffel bag hidden in the back of my closet. I know, keeping cash is risky, but I didn't trust the banks after the last crash, and I needed the money ready for my mother's care at a moment's notice. Every bill in that bag was a memory. A 16-hour shift on Christmas Day, the extra weekend I picked up instead of going on vacation, the worn-out nursing shoes I kept for 2 years too long. That bag wasn't just money. It was my life, my sweat, and my sacrifice, all stitched together with leather and a cheap zipper. The first crack in my trust appeared last Tuesday. Mark was on the phone in the garage, speaking in a low, hushed voice. I heard him say, "Don't worry, I'll have it by Friday. She won't suspect a thing." My heart dropped into my stomach. Who was he talking to? What would he have by Friday? I looked at his computer later that night and saw his search history: how to disappear, best places to live with no extradition, and how to fake a home invasion. The blood in my veins turned to ice. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to destroy me. That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I could confront him, but he would just lie. I could call the police, but I had no real proof. So, I decided to play his game, but with my own rules. The next morning, I went to a thrift store and found a duffel bag that looked exactly like mine. I spent the afternoon in the basement with a shredder and a stack of old newspapers, filling the fake bag until it had the same weight and feel as the real one. I placed the decoy bag in the closet and hid my life savings deep inside my mother's old Hope chest, under her wedding dress. The robbery happened just like I knew it would. A man with a cheap ski mask, I recognized his voice as Mark's deadbeat friend, Jerry, burst through the door. Mark played his part, shouting and begging the man not to hurt us. I screamed, just like a terrified wife should. I cried, just like a woman who was losing everything should. The masked man grabbed the decoy bag from the closet and ran. Mark waited a few minutes, then called 911, his voice trembling with fake panic. The whole time, I felt nothing but a cold, calm rage building inside me. Now, standing on my porch, an officer with kind eyes hands me a cup of water. "Ma'am, are you going to be okay?" he asks. I nod, forcing a tear to roll down my cheek. "I don't know," I whisper. That was everything we had. Mark wraps his arm around me, pulling me close. "Don't you worry, Glenna," he says, his breath smelling of lies. "We'll get through this. I'll take care of you." I look up at him, into the eyes of the man I shared a bed with for 30 years, and I see the greedy little glint he can't hide. He thinks he's won. He thinks my life is over. He has no idea that my real life is just about to begin. The police finally pack up and leave, their cars disappearing down our quiet suburban street. The show is over. Mark drops his arm from my shoulder, his entire mood changing now that we're alone. "Well, that's that," he says coldly. "Guess we'll have to sell your mother's house now. There's no other way." He turns to walk back inside, a small, cruel smile on his face. He believes he holds all the cards. He doesn't see the silent vibration of my phone in my pocket. I pull it out and look at the screen. It's a text from a number I don't recognize, but a message I've been waiting for. It has only 7 words, but they are the 7 words that will change everything. The message says, he's on his way to the meeting point. My plan was so much bigger than just swapping the bags. The robbery was just the first move. Now, it was my turn to play. If you want to see how a 58-year-old nurse gets her revenge, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss Chapter 2. My story is just getting started. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. The support means the world. Now, back to my husband. He just walked into the house, thinking he's a rich man. He has no idea that he just walked into a trap, and I'm the one holding the key. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, my hand steady, my mind clear. Mark walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge, grabbing a beer to celebrate the life he had just stolen. My life. He didn't even look at me. To him, I was already a ghost, a problem that had been solved. He had no idea I was about to become his worst nightmare. I needed to leave, to get to the next piece on the chessboard before he even knew we were playing a new game. I quietly walked to the hall closet, grabbed my coat, and slipped out the back door into the cold Ohio night. The engine of my old Toyota was a comforting rumble in the silence. The mysterious text message was from my younger brother, David. We hadn't spoken in almost 5 years, not since a bitter fight over our mother's care. He thought I was too soft, and I thought he was too cold. But when I found Mark's search history, David was the only person I could call. He was a private investigator, the kind of man who lived in the shadows and knew how to find the truth. I swallowed my pride and told him everything. There was a long pause on the phone, and then he just said, "I'll help you burn him to the ground." That was all I needed to hear. In the glove compartment of my car was a small bag David had given me. It held a cheap burner phone, a tiny audio recorder disguised as a keychain, and a map of the city's industrial district. Seeing those items made everything feel real. I wasn't just heartbroken Glenna, the nurse, anymore. I was becoming someone else, someone I didn't recognize but desperately needed to be. A woman who wouldn't just cry over being betrayed but would build a trap using her tears as bait. This wasn't just about getting my money back. This was about taking back my life. What other secrets was Mark hiding? My mind flashed back to the moment I knew for sure, the moment that turned all my sadness into cold, hard anger. It was yesterday. I was in the garden when I heard Mark talking to Jerry through the open garage window. They were laughing. "She keeps all her savings in an old bag, like a squirrel hiding nuts," Mark had said, his voice full of disgust. "She has no idea what's coming. By the time she realizes the money is gone, I'll be halfway to Mexico. Her and that dying mother of hers can figure it out themselves." That one sentence, her dying mother, was the nail in his coffin. Following the map, I drove towards the old shipping yards by the lake. The streetlights became fewer and farther between, casting long, spooky shadows across the cracked pavement. A light rain began to fall, tapping against my windshield like nervous fingers. The address David sent me was an abandoned fish packing warehouse, a place that smelled of rot and decay. It was the perfect place for a rotten deal to go down. For a moment, my heart pounded with fear. I was a nurse, not a spy. I spent my life saving people, not setting them up. But Mark had left me no choice. What would you do? If the person who promised to love and protect you was secretly planning to leave you with nothing, to abandon you when you were most vulnerable? Would you let them walk away, or would you find a strength you never knew you had? As I parked my car in the darkness a block away from the warehouse, I knew my answer. I would not break. I would not crumble. I would become the storm that Mark never saw coming. He thought he married a lamb, but he was about to find out he was sleeping next to a lion. My burner phone buzzed. It was a message from David. Stay put. I'm inside. I've put a camera on the meeting spot. I'm sending you the live feed now. Just watch. A link appeared, and when I clicked it, my phone's screen lit up with a grainy black and white video. I could see the inside of the warehouse. Piles of old crates, broken machinery, and in the center of the frame, Mark's friend, Jerry, pacing back and forth. A few minutes later, Mark's car pulled up. He got out, carrying the duffel bag, my decoy bag, and walked inside with the confidence of a king. I held my breath, watching the tiny screen. I saw Mark hand Jerry the bag. They both had greedy smiles on their faces, like two wolves who had just cornered their prey. Jerry placed the bag on a crate and unzipped it. I leaned closer to my phone, wishing I could see their faces more clearly. They reached in, expecting to pull out stacks of $100 bills. Instead, they pulled out handfuls of shredded newspaper. The confusion on their faces was instant. It was quickly replaced by a dark, ugly rage that was terrifying to watch, even through a screen. "What is this?" Jerry screamed, throwing the paper on the floor. "Where's the money, Mark?" Mark's face was pale. "It was in there. I swear it was in there. She must have moved it. That witch must have known." He grabbed Jerry by the shirt, his charming mask completely gone, revealing the monster underneath. They started shoving each other, their angry shouts echoing in the empty building. Then, my phone buzzed again. It was David. Perfect. I made an anonymous tip about two men fighting over drug money. The police are 2 minutes out. Get ready. The distant sound of sirens began to cut through the night. Jerry's eyes went wide with panic. He shoved Mark hard against a stack of crates. "I'm not going to jail for you, Mark. Not for this. Not after what we did to your first wife." Mark froze, his face turning from red with anger to ghost white with pure terror. I stared at my phone, the sirens getting louder, my mind stuck on Jerry's words. His first wife. Mark told me she died in a simple car accident, long before he met me. What did he mean, what we did? My blood ran cold. The stolen money was no longer the biggest lie my husband had ever told me. The sirens faded, but Jerry's words screamed in my head. What we did to your first wife. The video on my phone showed chaos as police lights painted the warehouse in flashing colors. Mark wasn't fighting. He was frozen, his face a mask of pure terror. It wasn't the fear of a man caught stealing. It was the fear of a man whose darkest secret had just been ripped out into the light. I watched them put him in the back of a police car, his head down. For a split second, I saw the man I married, scared and alone. But then I remembered his laughter as he planned to ruin me, and the feeling vanished, leaving only cold, hard resolve. The burner phone vibrated, jolting me back to the present. It was David. "Phase 1 complete," he said, his voice steady, without emotion. "They're taking them downtown. They'll probably hold them overnight on suspicion." "Did you hear what Jerry yelled?" I told him I had. "I thought so," he said. "This just got a lot bigger than money, Glenna. Go home. Lock your doors. When the police call you about Mark's arrest, act surprised and worried. I need to start digging into his past. I'll be in touch." He hung up, leaving me alone in the darkness with a terrible new question. Was I married to a thief, or was I married to a monster? On the drive home, the rain started coming down harder, blurring the road ahead. My mind drifted back 25 years, to a little Italian restaurant where Mark first told me about Catherine, his first wife. He had cried, actual tears rolling down his handsome face. He told me she died on a rainy night just like this one, her car skidding off a lonely country road. He'd painted a picture of a perfect love stolen by a tragic accident. I remembered holding his hand, my heart breaking for him. Now I saw that memory for what it was. A performance, just like the one he gave for the police tonight. Every part of our life together suddenly felt like a lie. I walked back into my house, which now felt like a stranger's home. Every photograph on the wall seemed to mock me. I had to play my part. I had to be the worried wife. I went to the mirror, my reflection looking tired and old. I messed up my hair and splashed my face with cold water until my eyes were red. Then, with a trembling hand, I picked up the phone and dialed 911. I told the operator that my husband, Mark Stone, had gone for a walk after our robbery and hadn't come back. I filled my voice with panic, the same panic he had faked for me just hours earlier. After I hung up, I sank onto the couch and stared at our wedding photo. We looked so happy, so full of hope. It's a strange thing to grieve a life that you are still living. It's like you're a ghost in your own home, watching memories that no longer belong to you. He was alive, sitting in a jail cell just a few miles away, but the man I thought I married, the man in that photograph, was gone. He had never been real at all. How do you let go of a dream you held for 30 years? You don't. You burn it down so it can't haunt you anymore. 2 new police officers showed up at my door. I explained with fake tears how Mark had been so upset about the robbery. He just needed some air, I said. I told them he would never just leave. I watched their faces carefully as I spoke. They were sympathetic, writing everything down in their little notebooks. But one of them, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, looked at me just a little too long. It was a look that made me wonder if my act was as good as I thought it was. Was she just being thorough, or did she suspect that this picture-perfect suburban street had more than one secret? Miles away, in his small dark office that smelled of stale coffee, my brother David was working. He wasn't a man who cared about feelings. He was a man who cared about facts. He typed, Catherine Stone, deceased, into a database. The official police report popped up instantly. It was thin, barely a page long. Single vehicle collision. Wet road conditions. No witnesses. Accidental death. Case closed. It was too clean, too simple. David knew that neat little stories like this were often the ones used to cover up the messiest crimes. He started looking for the things the first investigators had overlooked. He scrolled through old, digitized case files from that year, his eyes scanning for anything connected to the accident. And then he found it. A barely legible, handwritten note in the margin of a dispatch log. It was from a truck driver who had called in that night, reporting a car in a ditch. The note mentioned the driver thought he'd seen a second car, a beat-up blue sedan, pulling away from the scene just as he arrived. The original investigator had dismissed it as unreliable. David leaned back in his chair. He knew for a fact that Jerry, Mark's friend, had driven an old beat-up blue sedan for nearly 20 years. The puzzle was coming together, piece by horrifying piece. David kept digging, his fingers flying across the keyboard. If this was about money, he followed the trail. He pulled up Catherine's financial records and found what he was looking for, a life insurance policy. It was a huge one, worth $500,000 even back then. He read the details, and his eyes widened. Mark wasn't the only person who got paid when his first wife died. He was listed as a beneficiary, but he only received half the money. My phone buzzed, dragging me from my dark thoughts. It was a new text from David on the burner phone. The police bought your story for now. But I found something on Catherine. Her death wasn't an accident. I felt my blood run cold as I typed back. What did you find? The 3 little dots as he typed his reply felt like an eternity. Then, the message came through, a sentence that unlocked a door to a past I never knew existed, and pointed my revenge in a terrifying new direction. She had a massive life insurance policy. Mark got half. The other half went to her younger sister, a woman he never told you about. And she still lives just 30 minutes away from you. A sister. The word echoed in the empty house, a testament to a life Mark had completely erased. For 30 years, I believed he was a man alone in the world, his only family lost to tragedy. Now, I knew it was all a story, a carefully crafted lie to hide a person he never wanted me to find. A sister-in-law I never knew, who lived just a 30-minute drive away. My mind reeled. This wasn't just about my stolen savings anymore. This was about a stolen history. My brother's text included her name and an address, Ilara Vance. I had to know what she knew. Fear told me to wait for David, to let him handle it. But a stronger feeling, a burning need for the truth, pushed me forward. Mark had made me a victim in his fake robbery, a pawn in his greedy game. But I wasn't a pawn anymore. I was a player. I wouldn't wait in the shadows for answers. I would go and find them myself. I grabbed my car keys, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was done being the person who waited. Tonight, I was the person who acted. I was going to knock on the door of my husband's past. The drive to Ilara's town was surreal. It was a route I had taken hundreds of times to visit a shopping mall or a farmer's market. All this time, a piece of the truth was hidden right here, tucked away on a quiet, tree-lined street. The houses were neat and tidy, with perfectly cut lawns and glowing porch lights that seemed to promise safety and peace. It was a perfect picture of suburbia. But I knew that behind one of these doors was a story of a lie so big it had swallowed 30 years of my life. The peaceful street felt like the calm surface of a very deep, dark lake. My mind went back to a cold winter night, maybe 10 years into our marriage. We were looking through old photo albums, and I had asked Mark if he had any pictures of Catherine's parents or family. He had closed the album, a sad look on his face. "No," he'd said quietly. She was an only child, and her parents passed away years before I met her. It was always just the two of us against the world. I had felt a wave of sympathy for him, for the lonely life he'd lived before me. Now, the memory made me feel sick to my stomach. It wasn't sadness in his eyes that night. It was deception. I found the house, a small, charming blue bungalow with a beautiful garden, even in the fading light. I parked across the street, my engine off, just staring at it. My hands were shaking. Knocking on that door felt like stepping off a cliff. I could still turn back, go home, and let David handle it. I could pretend I never saw the text and try to piece my broken life back together. But I knew that was impossible. The truth was in that house, and I couldn't live another day in the darkness of Mark's lies. My old life was already over. It was time to see what the new one looked like. Have you ever stood before a door, knowing that the person on the other side holds a secret that could shatter your world? You know that once you knock, nothing will ever be the same. That was me, sitting in my car, staring at that blue door. I thought about the 30 years I gave him, the love I thought we shared. Was any of it real? There was only one way to find out. What would you have done? Would you have driven away, protecting yourself from more pain? Or would you have faced the truth, no matter how ugly it was? I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked up the stone path. My knock sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet evening. A long moment passed, and the door opened. A woman about my age stood there, her face framed by graying hair. Her eyes, I recognized them instantly. They were the same kind, intelligent eyes from the one photograph I had ever seen of Catherine. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cautious. My own voice was a dry whisper. "My name is Glenna Stone. I'm married to Mark Stone. Are you Ilara Vance?" The kindness in her eyes vanished, replaced by a storm of emotions. Shock, fear, and then a cold, hard anger. Her entire body tensed. "You need to leave," she said, her voice dropping low. She started to close the door, but desperation gave me strength. I put my hand on the door to stop it. "Please," I begged, my voice cracking. "He's in jail. He tried to ruin me, and his accomplice said something. He said something about what they did to your sister. He said her name. Catherine." The name hung in the air between us. It was a key. Ilara stopped trying to close the door. She stared at me, her sharp eyes searching my face, trying to see if I was another one of Mark's tricks. She must have seen the genuine terror and confusion in my eyes, because the hardness in hers softened just a little. "What did they say about Catherine?" she asked, her voice barely audible. She slowly, reluctantly, opened the door and let me step out of the rain and into her life. The inside of her home was cozy, but I noticed right away there were no pictures of Catherine on the walls. It was as if she, too, had become a ghost here. "Mark is a poison that ruins everything he touches," Ilara said, her voice trembling with an anger that had been simmering for 25 years. "I told my sister he was dangerous." She walked to the fireplace and stood before the mantelpiece. "He didn't just get away with her insurance money," she said, her back to me. "He got away with murder." She reached up and took down a small, locked wooden box. "Catherine gave me this the week she died," she said, turning to face me. "She told me to only open it if something bad happened to her. I've been too afraid to touch it all these years." She held up a tiny, tarnished brass key. "But maybe now is the time." The tiny brass key felt heavy with the weight of 25 years of silence. Ilara's hand trembled as she slid it into the lock of the small wooden box. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heart beating in my ears. With a click that sounded as loud as a gunshot, the lock turned. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just stared at the box, at this ghost from the past that was about to speak. What was inside? A confession. A weapon. What secret had Catherine entrusted to her sister right before she was silenced forever? Ilara took a deep breath and slowly, carefully, lifted the lid. Inside, there were no shocking photographs or legal documents. It was something far more personal, and far more chilling. On top lay a small, leather-bound diary. Beneath it was a stack of letters, tied neatly with a faded blue ribbon. And at the very bottom was a single, standard cassette tape. On its white label, written in delicate handwriting, were 4 simple words that sent a shiver down my spine. "For the police." This wasn't just a box of memories. It was an evidence kit, assembled by a woman who knew she was running out of time. It was Catherine's voice, waiting a quarter of a century to be heard. With trembling fingers, Ilara picked up the diary. She opened it to the first page and read the entry aloud. The words were full of hope and love, the writings of a happy newlywed. Catherine wrote about Mark's incredible smile, the way he made her feel safe, and their plans to build a beautiful life together. Hearing about this version of Mark, the charming man she first met, was like a punch to the gut. It was the same man I had fallen in love with, the same man who had promised me a lifetime of happiness. He had used the same words, the same promises, the same lies. Listening to Catherine's hopeful words, my own memories came flooding back. I remembered the first tiny apartment Mark and I shared, how we painted the walls ourselves and laughed when we spilled paint on the floor. I remembered the way he'd look at me, like I was the only person in the world. He had made me feel so loved, so cherished. To realize that my entire love story was just a cheap copy of another one was a special kind of heartbreak. He wasn't a man who loved and lost. He was a hunter who found new prey. Ilara flipped through the diary, her face growing pale. "The entries, they change," she whispered. She read another one, this time from a year later. The happy, confident tone was gone, replaced by a thread of fear. Catherine wrote about Mark losing his job but pretending to go to work every day. She wrote about money disappearing from their bank account. She described a night he came home angry and grabbed her arm, leaving a dark bruise. He had cried and apologized the next day, promising it would never happen again. It was my story. It was her story. It was a cycle of cruelty he had perfected. I watched the pain on Ilara's face as she relived her sister's final, terrifying months. She was learning the truth in the worst way possible. I looked at this woman, a stranger just an hour ago, and felt an incredible bond with her. We were 2 women from 2 different decades, connected by the same man's darkness. I wanted to ask you, how well do you think you know the people in your life? The ones you love and trust the most? Are you sure you know what secrets they keep when the lights go out? It's a question that now haunts me every single day. Ilara put the diary down, unable to bear it anymore. She picked up the bundle of letters. They weren't love letters. They were angry, threatening letters addressed to Mark, all from the same man. This was his business partner, Ilara explained. Their company failed. I never knew why. She read one of them aloud. The words were cold and clear. Mark, you stole from me. You stole everything. If you don't get me my money, I swear I'll find another way to get it. That life insurance policy your wife has is worth a fortune. Don't think I haven't noticed. There it was. A motive. Blackmail. All that was left in the box was the cassette tape. For the police. What could be on it? A recorded phone call? A final, desperate message? Ilara and I just stared at it. I don't even own a cassette player, she said, her voice full of frustration. No one does anymore. We had the final piece of the puzzle, Catherine's last words, but we had no way to hear them. It was a key without a lock. We were so close to the truth, yet it was still just out of reach. Just then, my burner phone rang, the sound making us both jump. It was David. His voice was urgent. Glenna, where are you? I quickly told him I was with Ilara and what we had just found in the box. When I mentioned the tape, he cut me off. Don't do anything with it. It's evidence, he said. Listen to me, this is important. I just got a call from my contact downtown. They don't have enough to hold Mark and Jerry. They're releasing them in the morning. A wave of pure terror washed over me. Mark was getting out. Released. Ilara gasped, overhearing me. He can't be. If he knows we have this, he'll come here. He'll silence us just like he silenced Catherine. Panic filled her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a steely determination I was beginning to recognize. We can't wait for the police or your brother, she said, her voice suddenly strong. I know someone we can trust. He was a friend of my father's. She looked at me, her eyes boring into mine. He has an old cassette player in his office. I'm sure of it. I asked her who it was. Ilara took a shaky breath and said the words that changed everything once again. He's the retired chief of police. The man who signed off on my sister's case 25 years ago. The retired chief of police? The words hung in the air, thick with disbelief. The man who handled her case? I asked, my voice sharp with suspicion. The man who signed a piece of paper that said my sister's death was an accident? Why on earth would we trust him? To me, it sounded like walking straight into the lion's den. This man, Chief Miller, was either incompetent or worse, he was part of the problem. He had helped bury the truth once. Why wouldn't he do it again? Ilara's trust in him felt like a dangerous mistake. Ilara saw the doubt in my eyes. It's not what you think, she said quickly. After the case was officially closed, Miller came to my parents' house one night, without his uniform. He told my father that he was forced to close the investigation. He said his captain wanted it gone, that Mark had friends in high places. Miller said it was the one case that always haunted him. He told my father, I don't have proof, but that man is dangerous. Watch your backs. He wasn't a corrupt cop. He was a defeated one. He hadn't buried the truth because he wanted to, but because he had no other choice. My fear battled with our reality. Mark was getting out of jail in just a few hours. By sunrise, he would be free. David was miles away, and the current police force had already proven useless. This retired chief, this ghost from the past, was our only option. It was a wild, desperate gamble, but it was the only move we had left to make. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Let's go. We took the wooden box, Catherine's final testament, and walked out into the night, towards a man who might be our savior or our final mistake. As we drove through the dark, empty streets, a memory of my own mother surfaced, as clear as if she was sitting right beside me. It was the week before my wedding. She had taken my hand and said, Glenna, I don't have a good feeling about him. He's too charming, too perfect. A man with no past is a man with something to hide. I had laughed it off, telling her she was just being an overprotective mother. How those words now echoed in my soul. She had seen the cracks in his perfect mask that I had been too blinded by love to notice. Miller lived on the edge of town, where the streetlights ended and the dark woods began. His house was small and isolated, with only a single yellow light glowing in a downstairs window. It felt less like a home and more like a hiding place. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn the car around. We were two women, alone in the dark, about to knock on a stranger's door with a secret that had already gotten one woman killed. The risk was enormous. This was the point of no return. As we walked up the gravel path to his front door, I thought about what it means to be brave. It isn't about not being scared. It's about being terrified and doing it anyway. I had to ask, what would you do in that moment? When every part of you is screaming danger, but you know that turning back means letting evil win. Do you trust a stranger with a secret that could be a death sentence? Or do you run, knowing that the monster you're running from will soon be free to hunt you? An old man, probably in his late 70s, opened the door. He had tired eyes and a face full of weary lines. This was Arthur Miller. He looked at Ilara with confusion, then a flicker of recognition. "Ilara Vance," he said, his voice gravelly. "It's been a long time." He was not happy to see her. "That case is dead," he said before she could even speak. "Let it lie." He started to close the door, but I stepped forward. "Mark Stone was just arrested," I said quickly. "And he's getting out in the morning." His accomplice was caught on tape talking about what they did to Catherine. That got his attention. The old, tired man disappeared, and for a second, I saw the sharp-eyed cop he used to be. The mention of new evidence, of Mark still being a criminal, reignited a fire I thought was long dead. He hesitated, then sighed and opened the door wider, letting us into a house that smelled of old paper and stale regrets. His living room was a fortress of books and stacked boxes overflowing with old case files. He was a man haunted by the past. He led us to his study, a small, cluttered room. On a dusty shelf, between stacks of books, was an old cassette player. My heart started to pound. This was it. The moment of truth. Ilara's hands shook as she handed him the tape. He took it, his movements slow and deliberate, and slid it into the machine. He pressed the play button. A loud hiss of static filled the room. My hope began to fade. Was it too late? Had the years erased her voice? And then, through the static, a voice emerged. It was quiet, trembling with fear, but it was clear. It was Catherine. "My name is Catherine Stone," she said. "If you are hearing this, it is because my husband, Mark Stone, has killed me." A collective gasp filled the room. The three of us stood frozen, listening to a voice from the grave. Catherine's recorded words continued, shaky but strong. "He thinks he's so smart. He thinks he can get away with it. But I know what he's planning. I know what he is." There was a pause, a rustling sound, and then she said the words that made the hair on my arms stand up. "He doesn't know that I recorded him. I have his confession." The tape hissed for a second, and then we heard a new sound, a door opening in the background of the recording. A man's voice, angry and loud, cut through the air. It was Mark. "Catherine, who are you talking to?" The tape ended with an abrupt, violent click. The click of the tape recorder echoed in the silent room, a sound that ended a life and started a war. For a long moment, the three of us, a forgotten sister, a betrayed wife, and a haunted cop, were frozen in time, prisoners of that final violent sound. Catherine's voice, a ghost from a quarter-century ago, hung in the air, filled with a terror that was now fresh and raw. Mark's angry snarl was the sound of a mask being ripped off, revealing the monster beneath. The confession Catherine mentioned was lost, cut short. We had the murder weapon, but the bullets were missing. Miller, the retired chief, was the first to break the spell. His face was a grim mask of frustration and regret. He rewound the last few seconds of the tape and played it again. Mark's voice. "Catherine? Who are you talking to?" Followed by the click. "He walked in on her," Miller said, his voice low and gravelly, the gears of a detective's mind turning once more. "She was making this tape to protect herself, and he found her doing it. This recording. This is probably the sound of the last minute of her life." The tape wasn't just evidence, it was an echo of the murder itself. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, each second mocking us. Mark would be released at dawn. Miller paced his small study, the floorboards groaning under the weight of his anger. "This isn't enough," he declared, running a hand through his thin, white hair. "A good lawyer would say this is just a recording of a marital spat. They'd say she was a hysterical wife trying to frame him. We need what she mentioned. We need the confession. But where could it be? If this tape was her desperate, last-ditch effort, where was the first recording she mentioned? It felt like we were chasing a ghost." As Miller and Alara looked through the wooden box again, searching for another clue, my mind drifted away. I thought about Mark, about his strange habits and his dark obsessions. A memory from a few years ago suddenly flashed in my mind, so sharp and clear it made me gasp. It was after a neighbor's house was broken into. Mark became obsessed with security. He'd hired a company to install a hidden, voice-activated recording system all through our house. He'd told me it was to protect us, but I'd always felt watched, like a prisoner in my own home. I now realized it was never about burglars. It was about controlling me. A crazy, desperate idea began to form in my mind. "He's a creature of habit," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet room. Miller and Alara turned to look at me. "He's arrogant and he repeats his patterns. He put a secret recording system in our house to spy on me. What if he did the same thing back then, in the house he shared with Catherine?" It was a wild guess, a shot in the darkest of nights, but it was the only shot we had. Could a 25-year-old secret still be hiding within the walls of that house? The thought of going back into another one of Mark's traps made my blood run cold. This time, I wouldn't be a victim. I would be a hunter. But the risk was immense. I had to ask you, have you ever been so desperate for the truth that you would willingly walk back into the lion's den, knowing the monster who lived there was about to be set free? I had only a few hours to find a piece of a puzzle that might not even exist. My heart was torn between the paralyzing fear of what Mark would do if he found me, and the burning need to get justice for the woman whose life he had stolen. Miller's eyes lit up with a spark of hope. It was a long shot, but it was a lead. He pulled a dusty, worn-out folder from a box, Catherine's unofficial case file. He still had the address of their old house. While he made a call to find out who lived there now, I updated my brother, David. A new, frantic plan was formed in minutes. David would be our eyes, watching the street. Miller would coordinate from his home. And I, along with Alara, would go inside. We were a small, broken army, racing against the sunrise. We pulled up to the house in a quiet, older neighborhood. It was a two-story colonial, eerily similar to the house I shared with Mark. It was as if he'd simply found a new woman to slot into his old life. According to Miller's contact, the current owners were an elderly couple vacationing in Florida. The house was empty. Just as we got out of the car, a text from David came through. "All clear. You have a green light." Alara reached into her purse and pulled out a single, old key. "Catherine gave me this," she whispered. "I never had the heart to throw it away." It was another message from the grave. Stepping into that house was like stepping into a time machine. The furniture was different, but the air was heavy with history. I could almost feel Catherine's presence, her fear still lingering in the rooms. For Alara, it was a painful journey into her sister's final days. For me, it was like looking at my own life through a twisted, broken mirror. We had no idea what we were looking for. An old tape recorder? A hidden microphone? We searched frantically, the minutes slipping by like sand through our fingers. Dawn was coming. Mark was coming. We found nothing in the living room or the kitchen. We raced upstairs to the master bedroom. This was the most likely place. Ilara suddenly stopped and stared at a large, built-in bookshelf beside the fireplace. "He built this for her," she said, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and anger. "He was so proud of it." An instinct took over. I ran my hands over the smooth, dark wood, searching for any sign of a secret. My fingers brushed against a tiny, almost invisible line in the trim. I pressed it. With a soft click, a small panel popped open, revealing a hidden compartment. But inside wasn't a recording device. It was a small, metal box. It was already unlocked. My hands shaking, I lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of old photographs and a folded note. The photo on top was of Mark, young and smiling, with his arm wrapped around a beautiful woman. That woman was not me. And it was not Catherine. We stared at the photograph, at the face of a smiling woman I had never seen before. She was beautiful, with long, dark hair and a happy, trusting smile. Mark stood beside her, his arm wrapped around her possessively. The picture was old, the colors faded, placing it in the same time as Catherine's death. This wasn't just a secret. It was a ghost. A third woman. Mark's life wasn't a straight line of lies. It was a dark, twisted maze. Who was she? And more importantly, what had he done to her? The questions hung in the dusty air of the room, promising a truth more horrifying than we could imagine. Ilara's shaking hand reached into the box and pulled out the folded piece of paper. It was a note, written in Catherine's familiar, elegant script, but the words were messy and rushed, as if she had written them in a panic. Ilara read it aloud, her voice trembling. "He found me looking through his things. His real name isn't Mark Stone. He stole it from a boy who died in his hometown. The woman in this picture is Rebecca. He said she ran away, but I don't believe him. I think he hurt her. He is a monster. I'm afraid I'm next." The real confession, the one he doesn't know about, is hidden where he keeps his trophies. The world tilted on its axis. His name isn't even Mark Stone. The man I had loved, the man I had shared a bed with for 30 years, the man whose name I had taken as my own, was a complete stranger. A phantom. A lie wrapped in human skin. It was a betrayal so deep it stole the very air from my lungs. Every memory I had was now tainted, every "I love you," a lie from a man who didn't even exist. He wasn't just a killer. He was a ghost who left a trail of real bodies in his wake. My mind, numb with shock, suddenly remembered something. It was about 15 years ago. We had received a letter from the IRS about a problem with our tax return. Our social security numbers didn't match their records. I had thought it was a simple mistake, but Mark had exploded with a rage that was completely out of proportion. He had snatched the letter from my hand, shouting that he would handle it. He was on the phone for hours, his voice low and angry. At the time, his panic seemed strange. Now, I understood. It wasn't anger. It was the terror of his mask almost slipping off. Where he keeps his trophies. Catherine's last riddle. What could that possibly mean? We looked around the room, at the bookshelf, at the fireplace. What kind of trophy would a narcissist like Mark cherish? It wouldn't be something obvious. It would be something that fed his ego, something that reminded him of how clever he was. We were running out of time. David would be texting any minute to tell us that Mark was free. We had to think like him, to get inside the head of the monster. I felt a chill creep up my spine that had nothing to do with the cold house. I was married to a man whose name I didn't even know. I had built my entire life on a foundation of lies. I had to ask you, what do you do when you discover that the person you've shared your world with is a complete stranger? When their name, their past, their very identity is a carefully crafted illusion. How do you fight a ghost? Where do you even begin to look for the truth when you realize everything has been a lie? "The bookshelf," Ilara whispered, her eyes wide with a sudden realization. "He built it himself. He was a terrible carpenter. Everything he made was crooked. But this, he was so proud of this. He would stand here and admire it. He called it his masterpiece. That was it. The trophy wasn't an object in the bookshelf. The trophy was the bookshelf. It was the one thing he had created with his own 2 hands in this house, a monument to his cleverness, standing right over the compartment where he hid his secrets. We rushed back to the bookshelf, no longer looking for hidden boxes but for flaws in the masterpiece itself. I ran my hands along the bottom of a thick, permanent shelf, feeling the grain of the wood. My fingers snagged on something. It was a tiny, raised bump, almost impossible to feel unless you were looking for it. It was a hidden switch. I pushed it. There was a low, whirring sound, and the entire back panel of the bookshelf slid silently to the side, revealing a deeper, darker void within. And there, sitting on a small ledge, was a single object, an old, handheld microcassette recorder. We had it. This had to be the confession. As Ilara reached for it, my burner phone buzzed violently in my pocket. It was David. The message was short and terrifying. "He's out. Black SUV is picking him up now. Get out of there. You have 20 minutes, tops." Our time was up. We grabbed the recorder and ran, stumbling out of the house and into the pre-dawn gloom. We jumped into my car, our hearts pounding, the tiny cassette recorder feeling as heavy as a bomb in my hand. Ilara sped away from the curb, her tires squealing on the pavement. I fumbled with the tiny recorder, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline and fear. I found the play button and pressed it. The speakers hissed, and then a woman's terrified sobs filled the car. It was Catherine. Then, a voice I knew better than my own, dripping with cold, cruel venom. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Following me. Finding out about Rebecca." We heard Catherine's muffled voice ask, "What did you do to her?" Mark laughed. It was a sound of pure evil. "The same thing," he sneered, "that I'm about to do to you." Just as the horrifying words sank in, I looked up at the rearview mirror. A pair of bright headlights was gaining on us, coming way too fast. It was a black SUV. He wasn't going home. He was coming for us. He knew. How could he possibly know where we were? Panic exploded in the car. The world became a mess of screeching tires and the horrifying crunch of metal as the SUV slammed into our bumper. The microcassette recorder flew from my hand, skittering across the dashboard. Mark's recorded voice filled the small space, a demonic loop of his last words to Catherine. "The same thing I'm about to do to you." Ilara screamed, a raw sound of pure terror, and stomped on the gas pedal. Our small sedan shot forward, and the chase began. We were running for our lives through the sleeping streets, hunted by the man I once called my husband. My mind, screaming with adrenaline, latched onto one impossible question. How? How did he know? How did he find us so quickly? He had been in a jail cell less than an hour ago. He couldn't have followed us. My blood ran cold. He was tracking us. He had to be. I grabbed the burner phone, my fingers fumbling on the keypad, and called David. "He's behind us." I screamed into the phone. "Mark found us. He's trying to run us off the road." The line was quiet for a second, and then David's calm, cold voice cut through my panic. "The car. Glenna. It's your car." David's words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Of course. How could I have been so stupid? He put a tracker on it. I guarantee it. David was already moving, his voice steady as he processed the information. "Just keep driving. Ilara, listen to me. Do not let him pass you. I'm close." A tracker. He had bugged my car. He had been watching my every move for weeks, maybe even months. Every trip to the grocery store, every visit to my mother's nursing home, he was there, a silent, invisible passenger. The memory hit me then, sharp and sickening. About a month ago, Mark had insisted on taking my car for the day. He said he was getting the oil changed and the tires rotated. A surprise, thank you, for all my hard work. He had come home that evening with a charming smile, dangling my keys and telling me the car was running perfectly. I had felt a rush of affection for his thoughtful gesture. It wasn't a tune-up. It was a betrayal. He wasn't caring for my car. He was turning it into a cage. The SUV slammed into us again, harder this time, sending the car swerving violently. Ilara gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. I could see the terror in her eyes, but underneath it, something else was burning. A deep, fiery rage that had been dormant for 25 years. "No," she said through clenched teeth, her voice low and fierce. "He is not going to do this to another woman in my family." With a sudden, sharp turn, she swerved the car down a narrow, dark alleyway, the sides of the car scraping against the brick walls. For a moment, we had broken his line of sight. In that brief, heart-pounding moment of quiet, I looked down at my hands. I was still clutching the tiny cassette recorder. In a world on fire, this was the one thing I had to save. It was more than just a piece of plastic. It was Catherine's justice. It was Rebecca's only hope. It was my freedom. When you have only seconds to decide, when you are running for your life, what do you choose to save? I realized in that moment that I wasn't just saving a tape. I was saving the truth. My phone rang again. It was David. "Okay, I see you. I have a plan," he said, his voice urgent. "Don't try to lose him. In fact, I need you to let him see you. Head for the industrial park." I was confused. He wanted us to lead Mark somewhere? "Glenna, listen to me," David said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "You're not running from him anymore. You're leading him into a trap. You are no longer the prey. You are the bait." A chill went down my spine. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Power. Ilara didn't hesitate. She expertly navigated the back streets, following David's directions. The black SUV appeared behind us again, its headlights like the eyes of a hungry wolf. Mark was so consumed by his rage, so focused on getting that tape, that he didn't notice he was being herded. His own arrogance was the leash David was using to lead him. We were heading back to where it all began less than 24 hours ago, the abandoned warehouse. It was the perfect place to end it. We screeched into the vast empty parking lot and Ilara slammed on the brakes, turning the car to face our pursuer. The SUV roared in behind us, blocking the only exit. We were cornered. Mark kicked his door open and stepped out. The charming man I married was gone, replaced by a monster with a face twisted by pure hatred. He held a heavy metal tire iron in his hand. "It's over, Glenna," he screamed, his voice echoing in the night. "Give me the tape." He started walking towards us, his shadow long and menacing. Just as he raised the tire iron to smash my window, the world exploded in light. A dozen powerful floodlights mounted on the warehouse roof flickered on, turning the dark parking lot into a brilliant stage. Mark froze, blinded and confused. Then, from the shadows, figures began to emerge. David stepped out first, followed by a grim-faced Arthur Miller. Behind them were two uniformed officers. But the real shock was the woman standing beside David. It was the sharp-eyed female detective from my house. She held up her phone, its camera recording everything. David had an ally on the inside. "Drop it, Mark," David commanded. But Mark just stared at them all, a slow, confident, and terrifying smirk spreading across his face. "You really think this is over?" he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You have absolutely no idea who you're dealing with." The floodlights hummed, casting a harsh, unforgiving light on the man I used to know. Mark, or whoever he was, stood there surrounded, a tire iron in his hand, a smug grin on his face. He was a wolf in a cage, but he wasn't scared. He looked at us, at the police, at David, at Miller, like we were children playing a game he had already won. The fear I felt was no longer about his anger or his strength. It was about his confidence. What secret did he hold that made him believe he was completely untouchable? He finally laughed, a sound that was both arrogant and genuinely amused. "You really think you've won?" he sneered, looking directly at the sharp-eyed detective. "You think this little drama means anything?" He took a step forward, unafraid. "Do me a favor, detective. Get on your radio and ask your captain about the Street Point Claire account." The name meant nothing to me, but retired Chief Miller's face went pale, a look of dawning horror on his face. He recognized the name. It was a ghost from his past, a name connected to power, money, and secrets he was forced to bury. The detective, though confused, did as he said. She spoke into her radio, her voice low. We all waited in a tense silence, broken only by the crackle of her radio. A few moments later, a frantic voice answered from the other end. The detective's professional mask crumbled. The color drained from her face, replaced by a look of utter disbelief and frustration. She slowly lowered her gun. "What is it?" David demanded. She looked at him, her voice a flat, defeated whisper. "The orders are to stand down. We are to release him immediately. We are not to touch him." It was true. He was untouchable. The St. Clair account, as we would later learn, was a secret fund for a powerful political family, a slush fund that Mark managed, burying their secrets and their crimes. He wasn't just a con man. He was a gatekeeper for people who were above the law. The confession, the threats, the tire iron in his hand. None of it mattered. The system was built to protect men like him. He had won. He turned his victorious eyes to me, his smirk returning, wider and more cruel than ever. "Now, Glenna," he said softly, taking another step. "The tape." But as he came towards me, something inside me settled. The fear, the panic, the heartbreak, it all melted away, leaving behind a core of pure, cold steel. I had spent 30 years living in his shadow, believing his lies, fearing his moods. I had cried, I had run, I had hidden. But I was not that woman anymore. He had torn down my old life, and in its place, I had built a new woman from the wreckage. A woman who would not be silenced. I held up the tiny microcassette recorder, the voice of his dead wife held within. "You want it so badly, Mark," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and strong. "Then you can have it." With a surge of strength I didn't know I possessed, I didn't throw it at him. I threw it high into the air. It spun end over end under the bright, sterile lights of the parking lot, a tiny dark speck against the coming dawn. It landed with a loud plop in the middle of a large, deep puddle of greasy rainwater, a miniature toxic lake in the cracked asphalt. It disappeared instantly, swallowed by the murky water. The physical evidence was gone. "You fool!" he screamed, his voice cracking with pure rage. The confident mask was gone, replaced by the ugly, panicked face of a man who had just lost control. He lunged toward the puddle as if he could somehow pull the truth back from the depths. "What have you done?" he shrieked at me. I looked him dead in the eye and, for the first time, I smiled. "That tape was for the police," I said calmly. "But I knew they might be useless. So I made a copy. For everyone else." I held up my simple burner phone. The whole time we were driving, I recorded the playback. Before he could process my words, before anyone could move, my thumb hit the screen. Send. A tiny blue progress bar appeared and vanished. It was done. "That confession," I announced to the silent, stunned audience, "the story of Catherine and Rebecca, and your real name, was just sent to the top 24-hour news channels in the country. It was sent to every major newspaper in this state. And for good measure, it also went to a dozen of the most popular true crime bloggers on the internet." I took a breath. "Your powerful friends can make a police file disappear, Mark. But they can't erase the internet." Checkmate. The color drained from his face. His power, his entire life, was built on secrets and the shadows that kept them. I had just dragged him and his powerful friends into a spotlight so bright it would burn them all to the ground. He was no longer an untouchable man. He was a headline. A scandal. A monster whose face was now on every screen in the country. Seeing the shift, knowing the public could no longer be silenced, the detective finally raised her weapon again. This time, the arrest was real. This time, there would be no escape. Months have passed. The St. Clair scandal is still front-page news, a web of corruption that my husband's confession blew wide open. His real name is known now, and the police have reopened the cases of Catherine, Rebecca, and at least 3 other women who vanished from his life. I sit here now, in a new, smaller apartment, the morning sun on my face. My mother is safe, her care paid for with the money I rightfully saved. My brother and Alara are my family now. We are survivors, bound by the truth we fought for. He tried to take everything from me, but in the end, he failed. He didn't understand that you can't steal a woman's strength. You can only reveal it. My name is Glenna Stone, and I am the woman who dragged a monster into the light. Thank you for listening to my story. The journey to find your voice can be long and difficult, but it is always a fight worth fighting. If this story gave you hope, please like it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of survival and the incredible power of the truth.